Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another session with the older man. Today, I want to talk about the ongoing cultures outside of the West that most Western women should take a page from, take a warning from, because a lot of these Asian countries are ahead of you. Most of the time, you will run to men to sell yourselves. I don't need a man until I am broke and I need to sell him on me, or I need to sell that coochie. Those are the only two assets that most women have at the end of the day. Now, men don't have that luxury. Another economy that is now on a serious economic decline, they're going through a lot of hard times. And we're going to highlight a particular story about how women are hitting the streets. So the country I'd like to focus on today is Japan. Now, I haven't personally been to Japan yet. I've been to China. I've been to quite a few places in China. However, Japan, no, not yet. My daughter loved the whole Japanese anime culture. So I will probably be visiting in probably the next year, maximum 2 years. Because that's something I would love to do with her, before she gets too old and, daddy's this and you know how it is. But what makes Japanese culture so unique is that it's quite conservative. The society itself is very disciplined. People always focus on making sure that they conform to social norms. And most of the society focuses on what is best for the society versus the individuals. However, there is a dark side to every single society. Even though, for example, this society in the Arab world is amazing on so many levels, it has its dark sides, just like Japan. And so this gentleman did an incredible piece on some of the problems that the young women are having in Japan. And I think, ladies, that you should watch this so that you can see clearly how you can be manipulated in this crazy world that we live in. All right? So let's get into this particular program. But first, guys, you know what I always ask, man? Give me a thumbs up. Just pause quickly. Thumbs up on this message so that the algorithm can show me some love. Okay? I always ask this early in the program simply because I know you guys always forget by the time you reach the end. So with that said, let's do this.
Industries are, again, one of the most discreet and circumspect group of people in the whole world, meaning that the female Japanese individuals who were involved in such quote-unquote adult entertainment work never actually came out on the streets and physically touted themselves. The touting for such establishments were usually done by men such as these guys, who usually asked the people walking by to enter such establishments. But right now, things are changing in Japan. There has been news after news about how recently it is now young Japanese women who are standing in the area around the Okubo Park in Kabukicho who are bargaining with men as they seek to provide these men with quote-unquote services at nearby love hotels in return for financial compensation. Now, I know how it sounds a bit superficial of how this practice have long been existing around the Kabukicho area for a long time, but the Japanese journalists mostly did not care back then, as such women were usually older women or foreigners. And also, I know that there is bound to be a comment in the comment section of this video from a guy saying something in the lines of, it's just gonna be the same old reason, girls who are trying to pay college debt, or pay for rent, or saving up to buy expensive handbags, etc. But in fact, these people cannot be more wrong when it comes to assuming the main culprit of this concerning phenomenon of the sudden rise of such quote-unquote standing young women in Japan. So without further ado, let's dive into analyzing the main cause of this alarming phenomenon that's currently happening at the very heart of Tokyo and the important message takeaway that it has for all of us when visiting or considering any social issues regarding Japan. 23-year-old young Japanese woman by the name of Yuka, let's just say her name is Yuka for the sake of this video, as the police did not reveal her real name, which has been rightfully done so as she is the victim, is feeling extremely lonely throughout her life in Tokyo. She did not attend university as she did not perform too well academically while in school and was originally raised in the countryside region of Japan. And to start a new life, she recently moved to Tokyo, but soon found out that things were not much different in Tokyo, or even worse when it came to curing her loneliness. And Japan being the most introverted, quote-unquote people keeping to themselves type of country in the world that it is, nobody checks upon her or asks her if she's doing okay.
Sorry to interrupt again, but this is a major part of the life we all live. Loneliness is one of the biggest biggest problem amongst the young generation. Everybody's on their apps. Nobody wants to go out and meet other people. It gets significantly worse as you get older and older. Now, the problem isn't only with the older generation. The problem now is almost the same with the young generation. What he's describing is how this young woman got manipulated into getting into the industry. And it hits deep because this is a young girl who left the country, decided to go into the city because every one of these girls are looking for some sense of excitement. Countryside is boring, but they don't realize that at least in the country, you will have a lot more interaction because people are a lot more communal. Versus when you get into the city, it gets very difficult because everybody lives in an apartment apart. It's very congested and no one trusts each other. I can see how this young lady can immediately go to the apps. I feel this because I also have two young teenage daughters who are about to leave home soon. And I'm trying my hardest to make sure that they will never feel like this. That they will always feel that they have a family. That they always feel like they have someone to come home to. So just my side thought. All right.
So while on the verge of a mental breakdown, an idea pops up in her head, which is to download a dating app. She puts her profile on the dating app, and soon enough, a good-looking guy messages her and asks her if she wants to go out for some coffee. She says yes, and there they meet on the first date. On the date, she feels emotions that she has never felt in her entire life. The guy is kind, and most of all, listens to what she actually has to say. For the first time in her life, she feels like a princess, and thinks that someone actually cares for her. And as the date progressed, the guy asks Yuka if she could be his girlfriend, and Yuka, already infatuated with the guy at this point, says yes. But at the end of the date, the guy finally confesses to her about what he does for a living, which is that he works as a male host at a host club in Tokyo's red light district of Kabukicho. Then he asks her whether she could sometimes come by to his host club and nominate him to have a drink so that he can move up in the host popularity rankings. He promises her that things will not be expensive at all, and that she just merely has to nominate him. And when she visited the host club for the first time, it did not seem as if he was lying. The price that she had to pay to nominate him was only around 1,000 Japanese yen, which is only around $10 US. So day after day, she visits the host club to meet her quote-unquote boyfriend Egawa, which is the actual real name of the guy that was revealed by the Japanese police. But then, day after day, the price that she had to pay in order to nominate her quote-unquote boyfriend increases substantially. According to police investigation, it came to a point where Yuka had to pay around 200,000 Japanese yen, or $2,000 US to nominate Egawa, in which she did almost on a nightly basis.
Damn, this is a serious con, man. Ooh, the con game is tight. Wow, women can be manipulated just like men can. When you add loneliness into the mix, right? Lack of a father figure, lack of a family, lack of contact with other people that you can trust. These women can get easily manipulated, much easier than men. Wow, the consequences are a lot more severe because they're not physically capable of protecting themselves. So they constantly feel vulnerable,
She knew that she was getting herself into debt in which she had no way to pay back. But again, given the fact that she was completely enamored with her quote-unquote boyfriend Egawa and saw him literally as the only light of hope in her lonely life, she continued going back to the host club and nominated Egawa on a nightly basis. But as we have all expected, there soon came a point in time when Yuka very much fell behind on her due payments to the host club. And once this happened, this is when Egawa encouraged Yuka to head to the Okubo Park in Kabukicho and told her to just quote-unquote stand there. He said that if she was just to stand there, then the clients will approach her naturally. And I believe everyone here already knows why these guys quote-unquote approach these women and what kind of service they're seeking. So day after day, there was Yuka standing at the park in Kabukicho along with other young women who were also in similar predicaments, making money by providing these men with quote-unquote services at nearby love hotels, then heading back to the host club to pay back her debt. And according to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, the vast majority of the standing young Japanese women arrested this year conducted such work for the purpose of procuring money to pay back to these host clubs.
Wow. Now, I've seen some of these. Listen, I've seen some of these host clubs in China, but these are very popular in Japan. And literally, these are just men who actually just perform like strippers in America, strippers anywhere else. Like it's literally like a strip club without the stripping. These are just men who are smooth as silk. And the majority of their clients usually were just older women who were either bored at home, not getting any D from their husbands, because there's a strange culture in Japan where once you're married to a man and you have kids, you're no longer his lover or husband, you're family. And it's almost kind of icky because you shouldn't have sex with your family members. Yeah, that's the kind of mentality they have. I saw this huge bloody documentary on this way of thinking for Japanese people. So a lot of these sexually deprived women would go to these bars. So that was a group. The other group were just highly successful boss B women in Japan who couldn't find a man on their level. So they just went out and get their toy boys to play with. And these women knew the game. They knew that these men had other women that they were doing the same things too. But they were just throwing money at these guys because these men convinced them of the fantasy that, hey, I'm your man. I'm your man. I'm here for you. And every freaking weekend, 2-3 times a night sometimes, these women would go to these bars and get entertained by these men. And they would spend thousands of dollars per night. A lot of these women were broke, these older women. So now the game seemed to have been turned to the younger generation because they realized that these young generation now are just as lonely and they might not have the money, the disposable income coming in from high-end jobs. But these guys are saying, hey, if we can manipulate them to get out there and sell their greatest asset and they're paying us for these so-called bills that they have at these clubs, we could make a mint. And so this is what's happening right now. And it's a shame to see it happening, man.
And the male host of the story, Egawa, was later arrested by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police in April 2023 for seducing, then later actively encouraging Yuka to solicit herself to quote-unquote standing up in Kabukicho and pay her earnings to him and his host club. So now, a lot of you may be quite surprised at this point, as again, many may have initially assumed that these young Japanese women are conducting such quote-unquote standing up work in order to pay college tuition debt, provide for sick families or pay rent, or for the more vain ones, make quick money to buy the Chanel bags, etc. And I'm not saying that these cases do not exist, as after research, I have found some cases where a young woman from a poor family background chose such quote-unquote standing up work in Kabukicho in order to make quick money to pay the rent that they're behind on, etc., etc. But then again, these are minority cases, as the Tokyo Metropolitan Police themselves have stated that the vast majority of the young Japanese women arrested this year in Kabukicho for such quote-unquote standing up work were all doing it for host-related cause. Now, I do not know of any single other country where such a large number of female individuals are absolutely obsessed with these, let's be honest, glorified male gigolos with what I would consider as weird hair that leech off of the earnings of the female clients. So what is the reason for this idiosyncratic Japan-only phenomenon? Based on my research of reading into myriad different responses written by various women in Japan, it mainly comes down to 3 psychological factors: loneliness, dangling with irrational hope, or just a plain and simple pursuit of hedonistic pleasure. A lot of the answers provided by the women in Japan gave the reason of loneliness and the lack of general intimacy that is the prevailing case in Japan as one of the key reasons as to why many women in Japan become obsessed with the host culture of the country. To elaborate, for many of the young women in Japan, especially the ones who originally lived and grew up in the known Tokyo regions of Japan and have recently moved to Tokyo.
What makes this any different from the pimp game in Black America? This is the pimp game.
Pimp. The dictionary is not certain of the origin of the word, but that's not important. Everyone knows what it means. It used to be that pimps were part of the sleazy underground of every big city, but today they've come out in the open. They get interviewed in the slick magazines. Their customized cars, pimpmobiles, and their foppish clothes make fashion news. Almost all pimps are black. They give themselves names like Hollywood, Silky, Dandy, and Snake. Who are they? How do they get women to prostitute themselves? 60 Minutes looked into the world of the pimp, the man who would be nothing without his woman.
Would you care to go out? I think we will.
She is a prostitute in New York. A working girl in the life is how she describes herself.
Where are you going?
None of your business.
She works the streets in Midtown and outside the expensive hotels.
Well, you want to go get a room?
Yeah, how much?
25?
At the end of her day, she turns all of her money over to a pimp. In return, he gives her room and board, some clothes, and a few trinkets. Her name is Cherise. Cherise earns $750 a week, and she turns all of her money over to this man, Richard.
These men have seduced women to go out there, sell their bodies to come back to feed me. That's the pimp game. That's all it is. This is a sophisticated version of the pimp game in America. Yeah, I could go into some pimp talk right now, but you get out there and sell that. You're for me, girl.
Why do you go out and work for him?
Because I love him. That's why. Can you understand that?
I think so.
All right, then that's your answer.
What does he do for you?
He gives me himself.
Paula, why do you work for him?
Why do I work for him? Because he needs me.
This is why I go out and work. Because he does need us. It's as simple as that. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving someone you love some money the best way you can,
You come back here, you pay your man the money. You go out there and do your thing. You treat daddy good. Make sure you treat daddy good. Now imagine that in a pimp hat. I'm going to see if I can get a pimp outfit here. Think about it in that purple Cadillac, that pink Cadillac, and his boots and that big ass hat. Okay? Pimp game. Women who are convinced that these men love them and he's special, even though he have like 4 of them in front of him, right? They all think that they're special. But in this respect, these guys are using manipulation purely, whereby the pimp game in America, you don't bring daddy his money. You know where that B slap came in from? From exactly the pimp game. Okay, let's get into it. Because the last episode I saw, I remember seeing a documentary on this, like I said earlier, but it was from the side of one of the guys who actually work in one of these nightclubs, right? And this guy had on a toupee, right? Under that, he was bald. He had on a waist trainer. I mean, with all of this shit, he had looked good. In the end, he was just somebody that's made up. He was getting older, but he was making tens of thousands of dollars per month just doing that. But the point is, he was smooth. He still had a lot of very wealthy Japanese women paying him sick amount of money to actually entertain them. But he was always concerned about the younger, fitter guys that were coming up and pushing him out of the game. It's no different than females in the sex game,
Lacked the necessary amount of friends and real relationships in general to suffice their psychological need for social interaction as well as intimacy. Hence, they may directly step into a host club in order to talk and spend time with his hosts, or as in the case of Yuka, follow an indirect path to first meeting a guy on a dating app who turns out to be a host, etc., which nonetheless ultimately leads them to the nation's host clubs that are located in Kabukicho. And of course, for the case of the older women in Japan, many women replied by saying that as many Japanese husbands begin to have a more colder, emotionless attitude to their wives once they get married, many of the married women in Japan may feel lonely and suffice their need for romantic intimacy by paying and interacting with these young hosts in Kabukicho. The second reason is the dangling of irrational hope. Now this one, I really was quite surprised when reading all of the responses from the women in Japan, and I believe their whole mental framework is just quite hard to explain. So please bear with me on this. So a lot of the male hosts in Japan are probably one of the most adept psychological manipulators of women in the entire world, with their entire livelihood depending on how well they can talk to and coax their female clients to purchase more expensive champagnes, pay higher nomination fees, which obviously becomes easier and easier relative to the degree in which the female client is infatuated with the male host. So what a lot of these Japanese male hosts do is that they dangle the idea of the boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with the female client in the lines of, if you could spend $20,000 for me this month and make me the #1 ranking host of the month, we could finally have an open relationship and be boyfriend-girlfriend. Now, the reason why I say this part is hard to explain is because for most of us who have not been brainwashed by these hosts and have no emotional attachment to them, we know that all of this is just absolute lies. If we reason rationally even to the slightest degree, we know that these hosts are probably saying this to every one of their female clients to maximize their financial gain. As in, we do not have to be a rocket scientist to know this. But then, if you read the actual answers provided by the Japanese women online, so many of them still defend these hosts, making claims in the lines of, to quote, although they have the job as a host, they are still, at the end of the day, human beings. So who is to say that true love cannot develop between a male host and a female client? So in the minds of these women in Japan, they believe that we are the weird ones, blindly judging that no true love can possibly develop between a male host and a female client. So as you can see from this, these male hosts in Japan are not just some gigolos with funky hair. A lot of them, especially the really skillful ones, are very, very good at what they do, which is to exploit the minds of many of the young women in Japan, especially the more inexperienced, gullible ones, and make them think that true love and relationship between them can eventually manifest to reality. Of course, under the condition that the women order.
See, this is the thing. Looking from outside into a situation where the person is being psychologically manipulated, we can't see from their eyes. And so, or you cannot say that person is bad or good. It is just what it is. The person cannot see what you're seeing. And that's the reason why quite a few men actually call me when they are in certain situations. They know something's wrong, but they just cannot put their finger on it. What am I doing wrong? What is it? And because they know I'm extremely upfront and blunt and honest, when they call me and I say, no, yes, no, yeah, you're being manipulated, my brother. You need to get out of that situation, or you need to say X, Y, and Z. You need to do this because I can see it from the outside. I can use my rational common sense and tell a person, yeah, you need to freaking change something because you're in deep, you're in trouble. That's the reason why you're feeling like this. And of course, when I tell women this, they like to feel like I'm being a bad guy. Reverse it. Reverse the roles. When a woman is being manipulated and she calls me, I will tell her the truth as well. But I can tell you one thing, man. It's much harder to convince a woman that she's in a shitty situation rather than a man. Because men are more logical. A woman will justify every reason that she's doing what she's doing and what the husband is doing, etc. She will justify it to the freaking nth degree. To the point sometimes I say, sometimes I just have to say, okay, well, you do what you have to do, but I can guarantee you that in the next 6 months, you're going to be exactly where you are right now, and you're going to wish you took my advice. Most of them are in that same situation. Some call me or send me message saying, thank you, it's 6 months. I put it in my calendar. Thank you, I got out. Or 6 months later, I don't hear from them because they know that they screwed up and they cannot bear to look at me and tell me I was right. But this is the reality of the psychological manipulation that we all play on each other, my friends.
Can eventually manifest to reality. Of course, under the condition that the woman orders a $2,000 champagne for 10 days in a row at the host club. And as you have saw with the case of young Yuka and the male host Egawa, it is exponentially easier for the hosts to conduct such psychological manipulation to a young 20-something-year-old woman who just moved to Tokyo from the countryside, compared to, let's say, a 34-year-old woman from Tokyo who have been here and done that, and already had numerous experiences and trial and error with these type of quote-unquote bad boy men. The last main reason as to why many of the women in Japan are so immersed in the nation's host culture is actually quite simple. It's just that they enjoy talking, having drinks, and making physical contact with good-looking men. Plain and simple. Their logic goes in the lines of, a lot of men in Japan also visit hostess clubs in kyabakuras, right? To talk and have drinks with these beautiful women. Same with us. We like drinking with good-looking men and spending money on them. It helps us to blow off steam. And if we have the financial means that allows us to live this lifestyle, then what's the problem? And to be frank, I believe such a mindset held by some women as their prime motives for frequenting the host clubs is probably the healthiest type of host-female client relationship that there is, compared to the loneliness dangling with the irrational hope of a potential relationship type of causes in which I have mentioned previously. Now, what can we then take away from this whole phenomenon of the rapid rise in the number of these quote-unquote standing young women in Japan? First, it shows us a glimpse of the dark side of the host culture of Japan. Thanks to the recent rise of many celebrity hosts in Japan, the host scene in Japan is now more mainstream than ever before. This means that less women perceive these hosts as these quote-unquote adult industry workers, but more in the lines of almost semi-public figures and celebrities, which in turn increases their popularity and demand, which then in turn allows many of these money-driven hosts, as in the case of the recently arrested Egawa, to carry out their schemes to psychologically manipulate many young naive women, even to the point of successfully persuading them to selling their bodies.
And that is it. That is it. The same reason why men fall for young, beautiful women who are feminine, same reason that these women are doing it. Because they're in front of men who actually listen to them and just absorb all of their BS. My friends, I just thought I would give you an insight into a serious problem that is occurring in Japan. Gentlemen, make sure that you tell your daughters you love them. Make sure that you make them feel that, hey, anything feels wrong, that, hey, you can call daddy and ask his opinion, okay? If you're not living with the mother, just at least make your daughters understand that that door is always open for them. Because, listen, it gets rough out there for women. And as the economy starts to change and gets worse, so many more women are going to make stupid decisions based on their emotions and trying to hold on to that feeling of safeness and security, especially economically, and they're going to do something stupid. Ladies, please don't go out there and sell your body when things get rough. I'm telling you, even if you have to find a female roommate to split bills 50-50, do something, but don't get into this sex industry, man. It's rough. And be careful about getting manipulated by other men, okay? So my friends, I'm going to leave it there. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please log into askanolderman.com and join our community or book a session. And of course, listen, go over to this gentleman's site and support him. This is a great piece that he's done. So yeah, the link is in the description. All right? So until next time, my friends, remember, whenever in doubt, always ask an older man. I'll see you soon. Cheers.